As we step into this story, I want you to understand that Solomon finished the temple, but not everyone liked it. There is a deconstruction of the previous era and a desire for change, just like politicians want change every year at election time. And Solomon's son Rehoboam becomes the king. And you're going to see the new king has a choice about what voices he will listen to as he makes choices about his own futures. So 1 Kings chapter 12, starting with verse 3. The leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. And Rehoboam replied, give me 3 days to think this over. Then come back for my answer. And so the people went away. I want you to see here that Rehoboam has a choice about how to reconstruct the next era. Turn to the person next to you and say, you have a choice. He can listen to the crowd. You know, the people that are talking to him right now are the whole assembly of Israel. They're the voices of everyone around him. And society and the crowd around us have a way of having an influence on what we think. The crowd around us is the crowd think of our generation. It changes its mind about important things all the time. People take polls. What's the most important? What's the most popular thing out there? I'll follow the popular thing. And ideas and values can follow the crowd. And then it says in verse 8, then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men. So there's another group of people that are speaking into the situation. These older men counseled his father Solomon. What is your advice, he asked. How should I answer these people? And the older counselors replied, if you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. So now he could listen to another group, the older council of people who had helped his father. Their advice was, listen to the people and lighten the load, and the people will love you forever. It's actually good advice for Rehoboam. He doesn't know the crowd yet. He doesn't understand the ramifications of his decisions, and these older leaders did. And so they said, listen, if you lighten it up, they'll love you, and then you can go into another project down the road. But they need a season where they're not taxed as highly and their backs aren't broken under the labor. They need a different season. So they're saying, this is what you could do. But instead of listening to the older council, he decides to go with another group, a third group of advisors. It was his friends. Look at the next verse. It says, what is your advice? He asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? The young men replied, this is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. Man. So they're like, go nuclear on the people. You're the man, you know. In a sense, they told him to do the insecure thing. Prove that you're better than your dad. Outdo what he did. And in a sense, there's always that bait laid out for people from our friends. And that advice isn't always the best advice for us. And he takes his friend's advice, and his choices literally led to a civil war. Later on in Israel here, now there's a breach. There becomes two different nations, Israel and Judah, just because of this guy's choices. Israel and Judah become separate nations and they follow a different path. Listen, following the wrong advice can really impact your future. It all comes down, though, to your algorithm. You know what an algorithm is? Let me give you a definition. An algorithm is a process or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. Any computer programmers here? You understand this. Anybody that's a computer programmer knows that you set up a set of data points of if-then statements. If this happens, this is what you do. In a real sense, when we are born and we are placed in a family. God's plan was for you to be placed in a good family. Not everybody gets placed in a good family, but to be placed in a family. And in that family, we learn the algorithms of life of how to interpret situations. So if we're nurtured and loved and cared for, and we make a mistake, we may be disciplined, but we know we're still accepted and loved. Now, some people, they grow up and the algorithm is such that, well, if I mess up, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, and I'm out. So you can see that all of us actually come from different algorithms about all kinds of experiences in life. Everything from how we handle relationships and the high points and the low points of relationships, how we handle marriage or view marriage, what the husband's responsibility is and what the wife's responsibility is. A lot of our expectations of our spouses come from a previous algorithm. And it was put there. Now, I'm not saying which one is right or which one is wrong. I'm just saying we need to acknowledge we all got different algorithms. And then when we face circumstances, shared experiences, and we go through, some of us are fight people and some of us are flight people. Get out of here. Some of us go into this algorithm, it's like a natural response. But listen, when you come to Jesus, you are introducing yourself to a different kingdom with a different set of algorithms. In other words, what you once did, now through Jesus, you can do something different. Not everybody understands that. This week, when we got on the plane, about 5 people ahead of us, we were in the aisle going to our seat, and there was already a commotion going on, and a fight was breaking out. And I was like, oh man, this is like one of those YouTube moments, right? Where you see people with their cell phones out and they're fighting, and there's a verbal thing, I think, but actually it's only one person. There's one guy who had got on and he was upset because somebody had placed a jacket over his bag in the overhead compartment. He's like, I got on here early. I was one of the first people on the plane, and that shouldn't be. And he felt a deep injustice. Something was going on. And I'm not making fun of this guy because I don't know what his background was. I don't know what happened before he got on the plane. He might have just lost somebody. There might be really important, valuable stuff inside of the bag. I don't know what it is. But what I do know is that it created a real awkward relationship with everybody around him, because nobody understood why he was so upset. What's going on? Somebody got up and they moved it, and we were still in the aisle watching this go on. And then he got louder and louder, and his arms started flailing. A flight attendant came up and started talking to him, and sir, we'll take care of it. And then he kept reverting back to what originally happened. Even though the coat was moved, he kept going. It was like a repeat. It was like he was stuck on an algorithm from early on in his life. And he got louder and louder and louder. Eventually, they brought a couple more flight attendants in, and a pilot came back. And when they came back, he's like, whoa, a different algorithm kicked in. Oh, you might be kicking me off the plane. I can control it, I'll be quieter. But it was too late. And he had to leave the plane. So here's what I know in life, in relationships. Sometimes we get into situations where we're like, why am I not fitting with everybody else around me? Why is it that it seems like things aren't working? Something inside of me needs to change. And this is what the hope of following Jesus is. The hope of following Jesus is he goes into the deepest parts of who we are and begins to recreate new algorithms. It's not instant, it's a process, but he does something powerful inside of us. Listen, I'll tell you what, we are all facing a battle of algorithms. Marketing is taking algorithms to a whole nother level. And I know you know this if you have a cell phone. Have you ever been looking at at something, and the marketing companies have got these strategies where they know what you're searching for. You look for a pair of shoes, and all of a sudden you're doing a search for a pair of shoes on Google, and then you open up your Instagram, and on Instagram, what pops up? An ad for shoes. You're like, hey, come on now, what's going on here? You can have your phone on the other side of the room, and you're just talking about visiting restaurants, and you pick up your phone, and what's on there? Ads for restaurants. The devil is a liar. He's coming after you. Here's what they're doing. They're real smart, okay? They're putting in front of you what you want. And the more you look at those things, the more they give you. That's what it's built to do. And the enemy is doing the same thing. The enemy wants to put fruit in front of you like he did Adam and Eve in the garden. See, there are spiritual kingdoms that offer you advice. And when the crowd is questioning things like the Bible and its validity, all of a sudden the serpent shows up and offers you something appealing that looks better than what God says.